My name is Rosalind, but to anyone who's ever sampled my peach cobbler or found solace in my porch swing, I'm Auntie Rosie. For 75 years, I've been rooted in these Georgia lands, specifically at Riverbend, the old farmstead where the Oak Haven River makes its lazy curve, a place steeped in generations of my family's sweat and dreams. I believed my life was as solid and true as the ancient oak that guards our front yard, a life built on honest work, unwavering love, and the deep, rich soil of tradition. But sometimes, honey, the most poisonous weeds grow hidden beneath the most familiar leaves. It all started, as many things do, with a whisper of unease. My husband, Thomas, God rest his soul, had passed on 2 years prior. A quiet man, Thomas, dependable as the sunrise, a farmer to his core. Our life had been simple, focused on Riverbend, raising our 2 children, Daniel and Lily, and keeping the family legacy alive. His will was clear. Everything passed to me, then to Daniel and Lily, when I was gone. Or so I thought. The first sign was a letter. Plain white envelope, no return address, slipped under my screen door one humid Tuesday morning. Inside, a single photograph. It was Thomas, unmistakable, younger but undeniably him, laughing with his arm around a woman I'd never seen before. She was beautiful, with fiery red hair and eyes that sparkled with mischief, and cradled in her arms a baby, no more than a few months old, its tiny fist clutching Thomas's finger. On the back, in elegant script, one word: legacy. My hands, usually so steady from years of canning and quilting, began to tremble. Thomas, my Thomas, the man who had been my steady rock for 5 decades. My heart, a muscle that had weathered so much, felt a sudden sharp crack. This wasn't a casual acquaintance. This was intimacy, undeniable, in the way he looked at her, the way he held that child. I tucked the photo away, deep in my apron pocket, trying to convince myself it was an old acquaintance, a distant cousin, a misunderstanding. But the seed of doubt, once planted, began to sprout. Then came the calls. Strange numbers, hang-ups, a voice, once a woman's, asking for Mr. Vance, then abruptly ending the call when I answered. I dismissed them as telemarketers, another modern nuisance. But deep down, the unease was growing, like a shadow lengthening at dusk. Daniel, my son, always the pragmatic one, suggested I see a lawyer to update my own will, just to be sure everything was in order. You know, Mama, with Grandpa Silas's passing last year and all that land he left, it's just good to keep things tidy. Grandpa Silas was Thomas's uncle, a bachelor who lived upstate and had, indeed, left Thomas a substantial parcel of timberland. So I went to see Mr. Harrison, the family lawyer, a kindly man with spectacles perched on his nose who had handled our family's affairs for 40 years. As he reviewed Thomas's original will, the one I had seen and signed, he cleared his throat, a hesitant sound. "Rosalind," he began, his voice softer than usual, "there's something I need to show you. Thomas, he had another will, a more recent one, and a separate trust." My heart stopped beating. The air left my lungs. The photograph, buried deep in my pocket, seemed to burn against my skin. "Another will," I managed to whisper, my voice dry as dust. Mr. Harrison placed a thick document on his polished desk. It appears Thomas established a separate trust 5 years ago for a Ms. Charlotte Albright and her 2 children, Ethan and Sarah. He left them a substantial sum, a fully paid-for house in a neighborhood called Havenwood, and the timberland inherited from Silas. Havenwood. That was almost 50 miles away, a growing suburb of Atlanta. Another life, another family. The photograph was no longer a mystery, it was a prophecy. "This is impossible, Mr. Harrison," I said, my voice trembling now, the polite veneer cracking. "Thomas was my husband for 50 years. He would never, he couldn't." Mr. Harrison's kind eyes held a deep sadness. "I'm afraid it's all here, Rosalind. Signed, witnessed, perfectly legal. He was meticulous. He appointed a separate executor, Mr. Caldwell, a lawyer in Havenwood. He was very clear that this was to be kept strictly confidential until after his passing." So Thomas hadn't just had an affair. He had built an entire second life with a new family, a separate home, and a hidden legacy. And he had taken his secret to the grave, leaving me to pick up the pieces of a shattered reality. I left Mr. Harrison's office in a daze. The world, which moments ago had felt so familiar, now spun on an unfamiliar axis. Rivermend, my home, the place where I had raised my children, now felt like a stage for a magnificent lie. But as the initial shock began to recede, a cold, hard resolve set in. Thomas was a quiet man, but he was also a fiercely private one. And now, in his death, he had exposed a secret that would ripple through our lives like a stone thrown into a still river. I was Auntie Rosie, and I wasn't about to let the lie of a lifetime stand unchallenged. My first call was to Daniel and Lily. They listened in stunned silence, their initial disbelief quickly turning to a hot, righteous anger that mirrored my own. Daniel, always the protector, wanted to fight, to contest, to expose. Lily, gentler but just as hurt, just kept repeating, "Daddy? Our daddy?" "We will fight, sweet pea," I told Daniel, my voice steady despite the tremor in my soul. "But we will fight with truth and with wisdom. We will not let this man's deception destroy us." My next step was to find out everything about Charlotte Albright and her children. Daniel, with his corporate connections, hired a discreet private investigator. Within a week, a thick folder landed on my kitchen table. Charlotte Albright, age 50, respected elementary school teacher in Havenwood. Widowed young, raised her 2 children, Ethan and Sarah, alone. They lived in a beautiful house, just as Mr. Harrison described. Ethan was a promising architect. Sarah was a talented musician. And Thomas had been a constant, loving presence in their lives. He was Uncle Thomas, a dear family friend who had stepped in after their father's untimely death. He took them fishing, helped with homework, attended every recital and game. He paid for their college, and to them, he was the benevolent godfather, the kind, dependable man who had always been there.
The photos in the folder hit me like physical blows. Thomas, beaming, teaching a young Ethan to ride a bike. Thomas, with his arm around Charlotte, laughing at a school carnival. Thomas, at Sarah's college graduation, looking every inch the proud father. He looked happier, somehow, in these photos, more relaxed than the Thomas I knew, burdened by the responsibilities of Riverbend. He had built a family, a life, with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. And he had taken Silas's timberland, our family's legacy, and given it to this other family, the land that was supposed to be Daniel's inheritance, the land that ran alongside Riverbend for generations. It was a brazen, calculated betrayal. But what surprised me as I looked at the pictures was not just anger, but a strange, unsettling empathy for Charlotte. She seemed genuine. Her smile was warm, her eyes kind. Was she a knowing participant in his deception or another victim? The question gnawed at me. I decided I needed to see Havenwood for myself. One sunny Tuesday, I drove the familiar highway stretch that quickly turned into unfamiliar suburban sprawl. Havenwood was pretty, tree-lined streets, friendly-looking houses. I found Charlotte's house. It was a charming craftsman, painted a soft sage green with a porch swing and a meticulously tended flower garden. Roses, petunias, and even a patch of Thomas's favorite sunflowers. He had planted those for her. As I sat in my car, parked down the street, I saw Charlotte emerge. She was attractive, but not in a flashy way. Her red hair was streaked with gray, her line with the easy laugh lines of a woman who knew joy. She looked honest. She was watering her flowers, humming a familiar tune, one Thomas often whistled. My heart ached with a pain I had known existed. It wasn't just jealousy. It was the pain of a lifetime of shared intimacy revealed as a half-truth. He had brought her flowers, planted her garden, hummed her songs. He had been a different man to her, a more joyful man, perhaps. As I drove back to Riverbend, the old farmstead, with its familiar oak and winding river, felt alien. The land, which had been a comfort, now felt like a wound. My next step was to meet Charlotte. Benjamin Harrison, after much back and forth, arranged a discreet meeting, framing it as a discussion about anomalies in Thomas's estate. We met in a private room at a neutral restaurant in a town between Harmony Creek and Havenwood. Charlotte was gracious, if a little bewildered, when she arrived. She wore a simple blue dress, her red hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her smile was gentle. "Mrs. Vance," she began, extending a hand, her grip surprisingly firm. She was attractive, but not in a flashy way. Her red hair was streaked with gray, her line with the easy laugh lines of a woman who knew joy. She looked honest. "Mrs. Vance," she began with a smile, "I'm so sorry for your loss. Thomas spoke so highly of you. He always said you were a wonderful woman." The words felt like a physical blow. He had spoken of me to her? How? As a distant relative? An old friend? I took her hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "Charlotte," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding a frantic rhythm, "I believe there's something we need to discuss, something Thomas kept from us both." Benjamin Harrison, who was present, cleared his throat, but I cut him off. "Tell me, Charlotte, how long did you know my husband?" Her brow furrowed. "Thomas, oh goodness, almost 30 years. He came into my life after my first husband passed away. He was such a comfort. A dear friend. He helped me with the children. They adored him. 30 years, not 15, as the will indicated. Thomas had been playing this double game for 3 decades. And what did Thomas tell you about his own family?" I asked, my gaze unwavering. Charlotte's easy smile faltered. Her eyes, those bright, kind eyes, clouded with confusion. He told me he was a widower. His wife had passed away many years ago, and his children were grown and lived far away. He said he was lonely, but that you all were doing well. He always spoke of you with such affection, Mrs. Vance. The words hit me like a physical punch. He had killed me off, metaphorically, of course. For 30 years, in his other life, I was dead. A convenient ghost that allowed him to play the grieving, lonely man seeking companionship. He had used her vulnerability, her widowhood, to weave his intricate web of deceit. My blood ran cold. The image of the loving, dependable Thomas I knew shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. This man was a monster of manipulation. "Charlotte," I said, my voice quiet, but laced with an icy resolve. "My husband, Thomas Vance, was alive and well and living with me at Riverbend until 2 years ago. We were married 50 years. He was not a widower. He was a bigamist, and I never died." Charlotte's face, which had been kind and open, drained of all color. She stared at me, her mouth agape, her eyes wide with horror and disbelief. "No," she whispered, shaking her head, tears welling. "No, that can't be true. Thomas, he was an honest man." "He was a master of deception, Charlotte," I replied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. He lived 2 full lives with 2 families for 30 years. He used your vulnerability, your widowhood, to build a second life for himself. Her hands flew to her mouth, stifling a sob. Benjamin Harrison, looking profoundly uncomfortable, finally spoke up, detailing the legal implications, the evidence, the undeniable truth of Thomas's bigamy. Charlotte's world, much like mine, was imploding before her very eyes. She had built her life around a man who was, in fact, a stranger, a meticulously crafted illusion. Her children, whom she loved fiercely, had called a lying bigamist Uncle Thomas. As her tears flowed freely, I felt a strange surge of emotion. Not pity, not exactly, but a profound connection. We were 2 women sitting across a table, bound by the cruel, elaborate lie of one man. And in her pain, I saw my own. "What will I tell my children?" she sobbed, her voice breaking. That was it, the children, innocent in this web of deceit. My own Daniel and Lily also reeling from the shock. "We tell them the truth, Charlotte," I replied, reaching across the table to take her trembling hand. "But we do it together, and we make sure they know, all of them, that they are loved and that they are not responsible for their father's sins."
Our shared pain forged an unlikely alliance. Over the next few weeks, Charlotte and I met often, sometimes at her house in Havenwood, sometimes at Riverbend. We talked for hours, piecing together the timeline of Thomas's deception, filling in the blanks of each other's lives. She showed me albums full of photos of Thomas with her family, recounting stories of his kindness, his steadfast presence, his unwavering support. He had been a loving, devoted father figure to Ethan and Sarah. I showed her my own albums, our wedding photos, pictures of Daniel and Lily as children, of Thomas holding them, teaching them, loving them, and it became clear Thomas, in his own twisted way, had genuinely loved both families. He simply hadn't been brave enough to choose or honest enough to live one life. He had chosen to build 2. The legal ramifications, however, were immense. Thomas's will for Charlotte and her children, while meticulously prepared, was built on a foundation of bigamy and fraud. Benjamin Harrison, after consulting with a team of lawyers, informed us that the entire trust for Charlotte could be challenged, effectively nullifying all bequests to her and her children. The timberland, the house, the money, all of it could legally revert to Thomas's rightful estate, meaning back to me. "I don't want to destroy them, Rosie," Charlotte pleaded one afternoon, sitting on my porch swing, the same swing where Thomas had courted me and where he had, undoubtedly, shared his false tales of a dead wife with her. "They are innocent. Ethan and Sarah adore him. This will crush them." My heart ached. I looked out at the Riverbend land, the ancient oak, the winding river. This land, my land, our legacy. But was justice truly served by destroying the lives of innocent children, even if they were children of a lie? I thought of Thomas, the quiet farmer, the man who loved the land, the man who had brought me a single rose every Sunday morning. He was a deeply flawed man, a criminal, a liar, but he was also the man who had loved 2 families, however imperfectly. He had been a presence, a provider, a father figure to children who needed one. My anger, once a raging fire, now settled into a cold, clear resolve. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about defining my own legacy. It was about choosing compassion over bitterness. And it was about ensuring Thomas's final act of deception wouldn't become the first act of destruction for innocent lives. I called Benjamin Harrison. "Benjamin," I said, my voice firm, "I want to nullify Thomas's fraudulent will for Charlotte and her children. Every cent, the house, the money, the timberland, all of it. I want it all legally challenged on grounds of bigamy and fraud." Benjamin sighed. "Rosalind, that is a perfectly sound legal strategy, but it will be public. It will be messy. It will expose everything. The news will have a field day." "I'm aware, Benjamin," I said, staring out at the river. "But once that is done, once the legal right is established, I want to make a formal announcement. I will personally establish a new trust, in my name, for the express purpose of providing for Charlotte Albright and her children, Ethan and Sarah. The house will remain hers. The timberland, while legally mine, will be held in trust for Ethan and Sarah to ensure their financial security and their futures. And I want Evelyn May Henderson to be a co-trustee. Benjamin was silent for a long moment. Then, Rosalind, he said finally, his voice thick with emotion, that is a profound grace and a legal masterpiece. It ensures their future while legally severing Thomas's fraudulent connection to it. It's not grace, Benjamin, I said, a small, sad smile touching my lips. It's justice. Thomas made a mess. We're going to clean it up, and we're going to do it with dignity and with the truth. The legal proceedings began. The headlines were sensational. Bigamy scandal rocks Georgia farm town. Beloved husband led a double life for 30 decades. The world watched as the carefully constructed illusion of Thomas Vance crumbled, piece by painful piece. Daniel and Lily, my fierce protectors, shielded me from the worst of the media frenzy. Daniel, pragmatic and sharp, worked with Benjamin to ensure every legal loophole was closed. Lily, with her gentle spirit, was a comfort to Charlotte, offering support and understanding. They saw my decision not as weakness, but as a different kind of strength, a profound and deliberate act of reclaiming our family's honor. The town of Harmony Creek buzzed with whispers and speculation. Some condemned Thomas, others questioned my long-standing blindness, but most, those who knew me as Auntie Rosie, offered quiet support, bringing comfort food and knowing smiles. The hardest part was watching Charlotte and her children endure the public humiliation. Ethan and Sarah, two bright, promising young adults, had their world shattered in front of the entire country. Their Uncle Thomas was revealed as a lying bigamist. Their mother, an innocent victim of his deception. I spent hours with them, separately and together. I told them stories of Thomas, the real Thomas, the farmer who loved his land, the father who taught my children to fish. I painted a picture of a man who was complex, flawed, but who had, in his own twisted way, genuinely loved for them. It wasn't an easy conversation. It was raw, painful, full of tears and anger and confusion, but it was honest. And that honesty, I knew, was the only path to healing. The court eventually ruled in our favor. Thomas's fraudulent trust for Charlotte and her children was legally nullified, and in a packed courtroom, with reporters scribbling furiously, I stood before the judge. "Your Honor," I began, my voice clear and unwavering. While my late husband, Thomas Vance, engaged in a lifetime of profound deceit, resulting in two innocent families being built on a foundation of lies, I believe that the path to true justice lies not in further destruction, but in compassionate restitution. I looked at Charlotte, sitting in the front row, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly. Beside her, Ethan and Sarah, their young faces etched with pain and uncertainty. Thomas Vance may have been a criminal, I continued, but he was also, for 30 decades, a loving presence and a provider for Charlotte Albright and her children. They are innocent victims in this web of deceit. They believed in the man they knew, just as I believed in the man I knew. They should not be financially penalized for his crimes, nor should their futures be destroyed by his choices. I then outlined my plan, the new trust, the house, the timberland, all to be administered by a new legitimate trust, with Charlotte herself as a co-trustee. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. The judge, a woman of great wisdom, looked at me with an expression of profound respect, her eyes glistening. Benjamin Harrison, my lawyer, nodded slowly, his own tears evident. Charlotte, overwhelmed, could only manage a silent nod, tears streaming down her face. Ethan and Sarah, though still reeling, looked at me with a newfound respect, a glimmer of hope in their eyes. It wasn't about winning a legal battle. It was about choosing to mend what had been broken, not with anger, but with a profound understanding that some hurts ran deeper than simple legal victories could heal. It was my way of taking back my life, not by erasing his, but by redefining it on my own terms. That was a year and a half ago. The scandal has faded from the headlines, replaced by the relentless churn of new news, but the healing continues at Riverbend. Thomas's reputation remains in tatters, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones across Georgia. But for me, Auntie Rosie, life has taken on a new, unexpected richness. Charlotte and I are not just allies, we are friends. We share stories, gardening tips, and the quiet understanding that only two women who have endured the same profound betrayal can. She often brings her grandchildren to Riverbend to play by the river, and my own grandchildren, Daniel's two boys, and Lily's little girl, play alongside them. They are all cousins now, connected by a complicated past, but embraced by a future of honesty. Ethan and Sarah are thriving. Ethan is building a reputation as a brilliant young architect, and Sarah's music career is taking off. They call me Auntie Rosie, a name I wear with a deep sense of honor.
They visit Riverbend often, not just for the legal and financial security it represents, but for the quiet comfort and genuine family connections they found. Daniel and Lily, my steadfast children, are closer than ever. They've seen me not just as their mother, but as a woman of immense strength and unwavering moral compass. They've learned that sometimes the greatest battles are won not with fury, but with quiet determination and profound compassion. I still tend my prize-winning azaleas. I still bake my peach cobbler. But now, when I sit on my porch swing, listening to the gentle creak of the wood, I feel a profound sense of peace. Thomas's secrets didn't break me. They revealed to me a strength I didn't know I possessed. They forced me to redefine love, family, and legacy on my own terms. I learned that true love isn't about blind trust. It's about open eyes and a courageous heart. It's about standing in your truth, even when that truth shatters everything you thought you knew. And it's about choosing to build something beautiful from the rubble, not just for yourself, but for everyone caught in the storm. My name is Auntie Rosie, and I finally learned that even the deepest roots of deception can't stop a determined woman from blooming, and that sometimes the greatest masterpieces are forged not in peace, but in the fires of truth, watered with compassion and nurtured by a profound sense of self. And there's one more twist, darling, a little secret I've been keeping, something that unfolded just last month. Charlotte and I were having our usual Tuesday coffee, sitting out on my porch swing, watching the river. We were talking about Thomas, not with anger anymore, but with a strange, almost academic detachment, trying to understand the man who had woven such a tangled web. You know, Rosie, Charlotte began, a thoughtful expression on her face, I found something, an old box tucked away in the back of Thomas's study in a hidden compartment I never knew existed. My heart gave a little thump. Another secret. She pulled a small, worn wooden box from her bag, one I immediately recognized. It was a box Thomas had made in his youth, a simple carved piece that I thought had been lost years ago. Inside, Charlotte continued, her voice soft, was this. She handed me a small leather-bound journal. It was Thomas's handwriting, unmistakable. And the dates on the first page went back over 30 years, almost to the beginning of his double life. I opened it, my hands trembling. It wasn't a financial ledger. Not a confession, not exactly. It was a chronicle of thoughts, musings, regrets, and surprisingly deep love. He had written about me, about Charlotte, about the children, about the impossible, unbearable weight of living two lives. Some passages were chilling in their honesty, but others made my heart ache. In a way that only seeing the truth behind a lie can. He truly loved you, Charlotte whispered, leaning on my shoulder, and for the first time, I understood something profound. Thomas had been flawed. He had been deceitful.
He had been cowardly, but he had also been human. And sometimes, even in our darkest, most misguided moments, humanity shows in the faintest, most fragile lights. I closed the journal, holding it close, and I whispered, softly, "Rest now, Thomas. Your lies can't hurt us anymore." The sun was dipping behind the trees, painting the river gold. I felt the weight of decades lifting, replaced by something lighter, something precious, forgiveness, not for him perhaps, but for myself, for the family we had built, for the children we protected, for the legacy we restored. Charlotte smiled at me, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you, Rosie," she said, "for everything." And as the river flowed steadily beneath the ancient oak, I realized that some truths, even the most painful, could lead to the most unexpected, beautiful freedom. And in that freedom, we found not just peace, but the courage to live fully and to love again.